ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another fabulous episode of the Healthcare Trailblazers Podcast. Excited to be sitting here today with Dr. Lewis, Yair Lewis. Yair is the Chief Medical Officer at Navina. Navina is a company that I've been following for a couple years at this point. Got to know some of your amazing teammates, team members. Dana McCallie, most top of the list. She's wonderful. And you guys seem to be doing really interesting things and really successful and really in the market. And so a lot of exciting things going on at Navina. Dr. Lewis, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Mendel. I'm excited.
So how'd you get involved in healthcare?
How did I initially get involved in healthcare? Where I come from a family of doctors, but when I initially probably decided to be a doctor, I was watching ER. So I think Benton or Dr. Carter. Those were probably...
Or what?
Dr. Carter. Okay. I'm showing my age right here, but those are some of the main characters on ER, the show. I started out doing clinical medicine. I'm an internist, and with my clinical focus is on emergency medicine. And I'm also got involved a bit in just doing basic science in the areas of synthetic biology and bioinformatics. And that sort of led me to the years when I was doing that, those 2015, 16, 17, just, the early beginnings of machine learning in medicine. We still didn't call it AI then. It was just machine learning. And I was, I was still doing clinical medicine. I was really excited to see how these algorithms can improve medicine, because it was like, using advanced algorithms in the lab and then going down back to doing clinical medicine felt like in some, aspects going back to the Stone Age in terms of systems we had. So I got really passionate about being able to utilize advanced technology and innovative technology in medicine, and that's actually what led me to Navina.
Fascinating. Yeah. That intersection of like medicine and talk to me a little bit more about the medical informatics before joining Navina.
So I was actually more in bioinformatics. So it's a different type of informatics. I was researching in our lab. We were researching very, very specific niche details about how mRNA is located inside a certain type of heart cell, cardiac myocytes. And in order to understand that, we used RNA sequencing, which was pretty new at that point, those years. Then we did single cell RNA sequencing. So the point is, you end up with a huge data set of thousands of cells with, tens of thousands of genes that are being expressed. And you need to use algorithms to analyze that and sort of categorize the different types of cells. But that also equates to, it's very similar to using medical informatics, right? You're looking at huge data sets of patient data, so large number of patients with many, many different data points for each patient, even thousands or hundreds of thousands of data points in patients, and then trying to understand, can I identify patterns? It's very similar, actually.
Interesting. And so tell me the love story with Navina. How did that come about?
It was sort of a love story, I started out as a blind date. So I had a friend who knew a friend, and he said, hey, these two guys, Ronan and Shai, founded a company. They bring a ton of AI knowledge, and they're looking to do something in healthcare. I know you're interested in that sort of thing, and you're looking to do something yourself in that space. Why don't you meet with them? So we met. That was early January of 2019. And I thought, hey, this sounds interesting. To be honest, I wasn't sure if it was going to work out or not, but hey, it did. Here we are, August of 2024.
Before we get into exactly what Navina does, just to maybe observe something, like, I feel like there's a lot of times I come across people like yourself where these personality traits seem to be kind of opposite. Usually someone that goes to school to become a doctor is kind of set on a very sure path, and it's a lot of school and a lot of work, and then you're going to have to work to pay that off, and you're going to go become a doctor. It's like a very kind of safe, so to speak, path. And then that kind of personality versus the personality that does what you just said, which is jump into something that you don't really know if it would work out, but they seem to clash. So how was that decision, and like, how did that work for you?
But, it's definitely not the classic pathway for sure. I mean, even going, I mentioned, synthetic biology and bioinformatics. I went out to do a PhD after I finished my residency, which is not the usual pathways of MDs that are doing an MD PhD program, sort of like a structured program within the medical school. So I don't know, I guess I like to jump into things. And, if you think of it, if you want to succeed as a startup, if you want to do innovation successfully, I think you need to have some of that in you, because it's taking risks with what you're trying to do and trying to quickly learn new fields is something that's inherent to success in startups and innovation. So I guess it's probably a selection bias of me being and other people being in this space. But it's, for sure, I agree. It's not the traditional pathway for doctors, which is usually very like preordained, right? You get into this, I wouldn't call it a rat race. Because it's not. It's an amazing profession, and I still do clinical medicine as an ER doc. But it is, you are sort of guided into this certain pathway, and everyone around you is doing it. It does, take a certain, it's not trivial to sort of diverge off the track. But I guess once you do the first diversion, that's it. You're
diverted. Yeah. And it's so true. I mean, this sounds maybe cliche and really simple, but really the very definition of innovation is that you're trying something that has thus far not yet worked. Otherwise, you're not innovating. You're just doing something that's already that already works, right? So and what's interesting.
Yeah, sorry, I cut you off, but
go ahead.
When you're waiting there at 3 a.m. in the ER, and the medics are calling in and saying they're bringing in someone who's in acute, pulmonary decompression, and they bring him in, saturation is 80, the monitors are beeping. Nobody's wanting you to innovate, Mendel. You need to get that patient stabilized and intubated.
Don't try anything new.
Don't start thinking about innovation. So, and that is definitely a very important part of medicine. So there's definitely value to doing stuff the traditional way.
Yeah. That's a good point. But to innovate, and that's, with patient care, but in order to create the next standard of patient care, there has to be layers, obviously, of innovation behind that. And, what I think is interesting is you kind of, like you said, once you do it once you, it's like a feeling. It's like this visceral feeling that you have inside when you feel that risk. And it's like very uncomfortable. And then you decide whether or not to go with it. And then it starts becoming something that you recognize, like a recognizable feeling inside of you that like, this feeling that I'm having is me being terrified about risk, which usually ends up being, paying off hugely. It kind of becomes this new.
Well, hopefully
or not. But, I've never come across someone that took the risk and, even those that failed and deeply regretted it. I've never really.
I mean, if you're doing it with the right mindset, then maybe you failed specifically at what you were trying to do, but you definitely learned a ton of things along the way, and your so-called proverbial backpack that you're carrying with the experiences of your life has just got a bunch of new experiences that are going to be valuable no matter what the next step is.
Yeah. I remember a while back talking to a serial founder, and he said. He says, I started 6 companies. I had 3 exits and 3 lessons.
Okay. Sounds about right.
Yeah, exactly. So moving over to Navina, what does, for the uninformed, give us the high level overview. What does Navina do?
Well, so, our vision in a nutshell is being that platform for primary care docs that is able to take all the data available about the patient and make it actionable at the point of care. So breaking down the silos between different types of data, whether it's EHR data, health information exchanges, claims data, whatever, different, there's a bunch of different data streams that are coming into the electronic health record. Some of them are not even in the electronic health record. And then, this area of the electronic health record, which is, it's pretty new, right? So it's obviously a blessing we have all this data available, but then so also the dark side of having all the data is there's no time to read all the data, and you always feel like you may be missing something. And the ability to provide the highest level of care that you as a doctor would like to provide is hampered by one having to spend time looking for data, interacting with different type of electronic platforms, et cetera. At Navina, we want to cut that down to a minimum and have the clinical data summarized at the point of care with action items that can easily be acted upon within the natural workflow of the doctor.
So do you guys sit within? I presume you guys sit within the EHR.
Yeah. So our platform is directly integrated with the largest EMR systems in primary care. And when we set out to design the system, we wanted to make sure that what we're doing lives within that workflow, because it's very, very difficult. And you, as someone who's very active in the space, probably knows it's very, very difficult to get clinicians to adopt any new electronic system for a variety of reasons. They already have systems that have tried to adopt that. Sometimes systems come with promises, we're going to reduce your workload, and sometimes they don't exactly reduce the workload. Sometimes they're not exactly user friendly. Maybe they were designed by someone who probably doesn't fully understand the workflow of the clinician that's using it. Plus, clinicians are not necessarily the most tech savvy people that are very interested in being early adopters of tech, right? It's not the 25-year-old startup employee sitting somewhere in wherever who's always happy to find a new system and learn how to use it. And the clinical workday is very busy, right? So anything that's going to slow you down by more than 50 milliseconds, is probably not going to adopt it. So we set out very early on. We made sure that we were understanding the workflow of of our users, of the users that we're trying to help. If you want to help someone, you have to fully understand the workflow. Actually, a unique part of Navina, Mendel, is the way we set up the company. So it was Ronen and Shai, the founders, and then Maor Adin, our chief business development officer, and myself. So Maor Shai and Ronen brought the tech background. Maor brought the healthcare business know-how from previous experiences he had, and I sort of brought the clinical user side. The vision and the development of our product was led from the get-go by Shai, our CTO, and myself. Shai being the more sort of professional product manager based on his past experiences, and we grew out the R&D division, so to speak, of Navina to be led by sort of like it's a two-headed monster, or I don't know, it's not a monster, it's a two-headed fluffy dog.
The opposite of a monster.
Yes. So something more friendly than monster, but by both a product manager, every aspect of what we're doing. There's a pure, so to speak, professional product manager and a medical product manager. So a medical manager who's someone who comes from the clinical space. Obviously, they have to have a deep understanding of biomedical informatics, of how to design medical products. But with the synergy of those two groups working together, we're able to sort of advance really quickly, because when you have the domain expertise within the product team, that makes it that much easier to, speak with your users, learn the workflow of the users, and close the loop, really quickly within the team. So that's, we started by discussing how Navina's integrate. So the one of the main, our core vision is to make it clinician friendly. So it's by design, we make sure that anything we're doing is going to be user friendly and easy to use and impactful at the point of care.
Nice. And so does Navina kind of summarize all that data based on, like, does it kind of understand what the clinician is trying to do at the different points of, meaning it's not just a chart summary, right?
Yeah.
Where's the intelligence level to, oh, you're trying to do X, we're going to feed you information that's going to support X versus Y.
Right.
Or is that not on my off mark?
So what we're doing right now, what the Navina platform right now does is it's able to summarize the chart, provide the ability to do an intelligent clinical exploration of the chart, which I'll discuss this a bit later, and also make sure that the value-based care aspects of primary care, which are becoming more and more important, to the delivery of primary care and the business of primary care, are also optimized, and those go together. Now, the value-based care aspects have both the actual clinical importance, right? We want to make sure that this patient's diabetes is treated well, and that the A1C is in the range we want it to be, and we want to make sure that they're doing the colon cancer screening, and that lady is getting the cervical cancer screening done, and et cetera, et cetera. All of those are the clinical aspects of providing primary care, but they are also measurables in the realm of value-based care. What we were able to do is to, for the primary care organizations that want to see in primary care, in value-based care, you need to get that engagement at the point of care. You need to get the engagement of clinicians, and you need to get them on board with what you're trying to do. Now, what Navina is able to do is, as you mentioned, Mendel, is understand what they need to do at a certain point, right? So a patient comes in, and when they're doing the chart review, maybe it's an AWV, right, or an annual wellness visit, they need to understand, okay, where does this patient stand on all of these HEDIS quality metrics? Maybe this patient, we want to make sure that the chronic diseases, that I addressed all of them this year. Why? Because it's important for me as a clinician to make sure that I'm treating all of their chronic conditions. But also, this patient on the organizational level, and this usually doesn't interest clinicians, and rightfully so, because they're there to treat the patient, right, an employed clinician. But for the organization, the primary care org, their value-based care contracts have different areas and different levels of capitation. Some of them are tied to risk adjustment, for instance. So making sure that the clinician at the point of care is treating all the chronic conditions that the patient has, and making sure that they're not missing any conditions. Hey, this patient, he does not have, he did an echo last year because he was in the ER for chest pain, and no one noticed that on page 17, on the findings of the echo, we see actually has a reduced ejection fraction. Now, this may sound, to the uninitiated, wow, how can a doctor miss something like that? But that stuff happens, right? So even if it happens only 5% of the time, the ability to identify those 5% and prevent them is really important when the organization is treating tens or hundreds of thousands of lives. Yeah. So what Navina, the uniqueness of Navina in this regard is the ability to take you asked about AI. So use our different algorithms to read unstructured information and understand it. And based on that, make sure that, all of the clinical information about the patient is immediately apparent to the clinician.
Got it. You mentioned earlier how when you started this, it wasn't called AI, it was called machine learning. And I suspect that we're returning to that very quickly, where you don't want to call this AI, you want to call it machine learning, because AI has been kind of just overwhelmed by every piece of technology has just become AI. And a lot of it is really Gen AI and, different, other kind of AI applications of AI. Talk to me a little bit about clinician adoption. There's a lot of talk about it. Obviously, there's a lot of damage being done with overhyping things that maybe aren't there, and overselling and overpromising a lot of AI. But on the flip side, when it gets it right, it's brilliant. It's amazing. So talk to me a little bit about how has the adoption been and what's your kind of perspective on that challenge?
So adoption of Navina is very high. And we're very proud of that. It's one of the metrics that we measure. They're very important to us. They're very important to our clients because, as I mentioned earlier, if an organization wants to succeed and improve at the point of care, they're putting in, they need to make sure, wants to succeed in value-based care, they need to get the point of care, the clinical teams engaged. And getting clinicians engaged is difficult. We're seeing adoption of Navina at, I'd say, across the board about 85%. So 85% of users are weekly active users of Navina on the Navina platform. The way to get the adoption is to be able to be useful. So whereas, if you're a platform that is only optimized for the organizational needs, in value-based care and pointing out specific, stuff that you want the care team to do, like order this, send him to that, code this, it's probably going to be less well adopted than a platform like Navina that was designed from the ground up to be clinically useful. Now, in terms of the AI, so it's an interesting topic, Mendel, because, and you mentioned even the naming of, ML to AI. And, there's this sort of meme where, AI is when you pitch it, ML is what, you tell the data scientist when you hire him, what does he actually do? He just does statistics, gradient descent or whatever. But so AI and especially with Gen AI, so it's getting a lot of hype now. And there's even some trepidation, right? Because when you go to a clinician, Mendel, and you say, hey, my platform uses AI, so you suddenly get questions like, oh, is it going to hallucinate? Is it going to, and that obviously is not, it's not part of a platform that is able to use different models that are not necessarily generative models to summarize clinical information that's in the record. So the ability to identify where it says on the scanned echo ejection fraction of 45% and understand that that's in the context of the summary or the findings, and it's not some diagnosis that is written in the indication, and being able to ignore the squiggly lines on that scan document and take all of that and output a sort of alert for the clinician. Hey, that patient appears to have reduced heart failure. They may suffer from congestive heart failure. That's not using Gen AI. That's using a bunch of proprietary language models that we trained at Navina to be able to identify that. So I'm just saying hallucination is not a part of that. But then again, when we go to speak with users now, when we go to speak with doctors about Navina, so that stuff comes up because it's all over the news in the news. So a lot of what we do is also, I have lots of actually sort of call it physician education, right? Because you go on calls, you meet people, and they're intrigued by the way AI can enhance what they're doing, but they're also concerned: is it going to make stuff up, right? Is it going to make decisions by some black box algorithms that's going to be now very biased? Because and I'm not saying that's definitely an issue. What we do in Navina is when we train different models, we make sure to take, that the data sets that we're using are a mix of different types of populations. We want to make sure that it's getting some rural population from somewhere, some more urban population, and getting mix of different types of patients, older patients, younger patients. Because unless you do that, the output may be biased towards diagnosing one thing, but underdiagnosing another, type of what you're trying to achieve.
Right. You guys have successfully integrated with all the major EHRs, and there's a lot of back and forth that I hear, a lot of different opinions about the state of interoperability, and whether, large players like Epic are helpful, if they are blocking people, and other people as well. Epic is obviously the biggest, but
the big boys.
From your practical experience, you guys have done it. What's the state of interoperability in the US today? Is it friendly? Is it painful? Where's it at?
Well, it is friendly. It is sometimes painful, but it's definitely on a very positive trajectory, the way I see it. Like when we started out in 2019, so there were still different final rules from the ONC that were being finalized, and then some of the timelines were pushed back, and then Corona came in. But if you just compare 2019 to where we are today, a lot more EHR systems now have FHIR-based APIs that are actually transmitting useful clinical data as advertised, so to speak. Navina is integrated with Epic. Epic has a whole suite of, they call it Open Epic, of FHIR API endpoints, and also proprietary endpoints that are sharing information. That would have been close to, even difficult to imagine in 2017, 2018,
Wow.
even in 2019. So I think there's a big move forward, and also standardization of some of the data. Obviously, there's still, there's gaps sometimes, and EHR system is, so to speak, certified by the ONC by passing different types of checkpoints. But then when you get to the nitty gritty of what's going in through those endpoints, it's not actually the data that you would expect. So it can pass like a very crude test of, are all of these required endpoints actionable? But when you get the data from the endpoints and you drill down, it's not specifically the data you'd be needing. So there's definitely still some teething issues, but I definitely see this trajectory as positive.
That's great. Yeah. And I feel like that's the message I'm hearing more and more. I still see it to the other side, but I think the best line still comes from my friend Brendan Keeler, formerly of Epic. He's now at HTD. And he came on the podcast and he said, maybe Epic isn't this big, bad, mean monster bully. Maybe you just have a crappy product. That was for people that complain that they can't, they can't work together. And I think that may be the case. But something that definitely strikes me. You guys are obviously you're based out of Israel. There's so many companies, innovative companies in healthcare based out of Israel, and then they all try to launch in the US to actually find an actual market. There's obviously an outsized amount of innovation happening in Israel. What's your take on why that is?
So, there's whole books and dissertations that have been written about this.
Your personal take.
No, obviously being an Israeli comes with its set of challenges. And I think, just as being a young society, there's a lot of innovation going on in this society. And I guess it's just part of the, of the local DNA of anyone, that's growing up, that's living in Israel. And there's this large ecosystem, right? So there's also, when you go out and you want to innovate, it's really helpful to be in a place where there's other people that are also innovating, because you can join forces, you can meet people, like the way I got to Navina, right? So it was an angel investor who had previously done a cybersecurity exit, and he knew Renan, but he also knew me from different, paths that we crossed. So, once you have that ecosystem of innovation, I think it drives it. People are looking to do new stuff. People are looking to put in new technologies. And it's interesting what you said about, they are starting out in the local market. Makes sense sometimes, but sometimes it doesn't. For us as Navina, we did not start in the local market. So we, from the get-go, our only go-to market was the US primary care system, and that's where we, that's how we designed the platform from the ground up. So, yeah, the R&D is based in Israel, but as we've grown, the entire, the customer success, sales, tech support, etc., those are already based in the States, and since our clients are all there.
Yeah. That's great. What's your take on, I feel like there's two kinds of AI quote unquote startups that are in danger, so to speak, or
only two.
One is on the extreme side, AI startups that promise pie in the sky, not practical, something way out in the future, and they're just overselling it, and then it's just they don't really have. Maybe they raise a bunch of money and they make a lot of noise, but they don't actually have any real traction. And
do you have any examples?
A lot of examples of those. What?
Any specific examples, Mendel?
Yes, I'll give them to you off camera, but very, very specific examples. And then on the flip side, you have people on the other opposite of the spectrum. You have people that are creating these these basic tools, but the next GPT update or the next Claude update or the next Llama is gonna wipe them away. I think, and obviously the argument in the middle is you want to create something that's really deep and very specific, and the large models aren't really going to do that. But anyway, what's your take on where kind of Navina lands and just the general landscape from that perspective?
Yeah. So we're definitely the first kind, just over-promising it. No, I'm kidding.
Well, you guys are in the market. I mean, how many patients are you now? Or what's your bragging number?
I think we're probably covering anywhere between 2 and 3 million lives right now. I mean, I don't know the specific number.
So it might be 5, but it's not in the sky.
I am kidding. The second kind, those are basically companies that are centered around calling an API of some LLM, of some base model. And definitely there's opportunity in that. There's also a big risk in doing that. It's definitely not what we're doing in Navina. I mean, we've only recently started utilizing LLM. Our platform is based on homegrown models that have nothing to do with generative AI. And the first kind, I don't know if it's unique to healthcare. It's you see that all over the startup space, right? People are coming in with their huge ideas and promising stuff, but then the execution is meh, or even flawed, or even they hit a wall and then they can't execute and deliver. One of the things that I'm very proud of at Navina, we're all proud of at Navina, is the ability to execute and deliver. And what are I think when one is starting a startup, let's put it this way, and having a vision and designing a product, you need to have a good product, and you need to understand what problem are you solving and for whom. And then for that user, you need to make sure that your platform is optimized for solving that product for that type of user. And maybe you're solving a solving a problem for an organization, but then you need to have an in-depth understanding. Okay, what is the problem and what are the root causes of this problem? And sometimes in healthcare, it's very difficult because, you can go and speak with doctors and you can get, very specific request of, hey, this is my problem or that is my problem. And then you can go and speak with healthcare executives and they'll say, my problem is, I don't know, is cost containment, risk adjustment, quality metrics, I don't know. But the question is, okay, what's the main bottleneck of the problem that I can solve? Because maybe, I'm solving something that I identified because I spoke with 5 doctors and I think that I'm solving X, but X is only just the first step. And the bigger problem is actually, Y. It's something downstream that has to do with the way the back office is interacting with something else and the revenue cycle. I'm just making stuff up. But I think, you understand what I'm saying, Mendel. So the way to avoid being, I think, that type of company, obviously, I mean, first of all, you need to build a company that knows how to execute and deliver. That's, it's a given for any industry. But I think specifically in healthcare, because it's so complicated, right? There's a gajillion different stakeholders. And I don't know how it is for you, Mendel, but at least for me, like every day I feel like, hey, everything I thought about, I understood about something about healthcare economy, is turns out I don't really understand it because there's some other player right in there that I didn't even know existed, but it's part of the process, or suddenly CMS changes something or whatever. So it's very complicated, and sometimes it's difficult to understand exactly what the problem is and what's your ability to actually solve that problem.
And I think that's insightful. And to kind of bring it in a step further, in healthcare applications, you don't only have the so to speak, not threat, but you don't have the dynamic just of the large LLMs trying to solve for things as well, but you also have the EHRs, right? So like I think a good example is ambient listening and note taking. Epic did a lot of work with working together with and propping up really companies like Nuance and Abridge over companies like not over, but that you've got Nabla and DeepScribe, some of the others, and there's the other 14 million other ones that are out there. But Epic is Epic is going to launch their own. Epic is going to put their own written EHR, and that's one side. That's one side that I'm hearing. Another side that I'm hearing is, they always say that and they promise that, but at the end of the day, it's not what their company does, and they're going to build something that's not as good, and people are going to stick with, right? So, what's your thought as far as partnership versus threat from the EHRs of the world?
No. So definitely, Mendel, this is something that any digital health startup is thinking about, and if they're not thinking about, they should be thinking about. It's very similar to any general tech startup needs to think about when they're thinking about about Microsoft, Google, etc. Right? Because anytime you're a startup, probably if Google decided to solve what you're trying to solve, theoretically they could just replace what you're doing, probably and maybe spend more resources on it, but they have unlimited resources compared with you. So in the healthcare space, so EHRs are these huge companies. They have a ton of resources and a ton of experience that you as a nascent startup probably don't have. On the other hand, you have agility and you have your specialization, right? You're trying to solve something very specific. And sometimes, like in what we're doing, it allows you to bring together, different pieces of the puzzle faster and more efficiently than an EHR would, be able to do or is interested in doing, right? Because they're focused on other stuff. Ambient is a great example. Epic decided it would be better for them to, at least, from what I'm seeing, I don't have any inside information about this, but obviously Epic decided it would be more beneficial for them to partner with a bunch of different companies, right, to sort of hedging their bets a bit with Ambient, instead of just going from the ground up and developing that on their own. Other, EHRs have done differently, and they're sort of developing their own ambient technology. I know, that's what eClinicalWorks are trying to do, as far as I can gather from the messaging that they're putting out, just as an example.
Mm-hmm. I think I heard it as well.
So I guess, if you're a startup and you're trying to, you need to understand that the mindset should not be, I'm trying to beat the EHR, right? Because it's going to be very difficult for you to beat the EHR. Like the usage for the EHR, the adoption of the EHR with clinicians is 100%, right? And they don't need to do any, specific, marketing with the users or whatever. It's just a given, that's the operating system for clinical teams, the EHR. So they definitely have that advantage.
I'm kind of thinking about this now, but the only thing I'll add to that, I think, to double down on your point, is that it's not just about the resources and the fact that, a startup is solely focused on this problem versus a large platform is focused on a million problems, and maybe they'll add this and maybe they'll create a team for this, but that's not who they are versus the startup. But the other thing is really when it comes down to the actual, and part of that, I guess, is really, really, really deeply understanding the users, which only, the successful startups really, really understand their users. And I think that that's probably something that a lot of these, a lot of the larger companies, even though they technically have the distribution, like you said, they have the adoption, they just have to put something in front of people and they'll use it. But they could actually that could actually go south. I'm just thinking of an example in my head, like Grammarly, right? Grammarly has, I don't know how many millions or hundreds of millions of users. I'm a Grammarly user. And since they started putting AI, Gen AI into it, I mean, it was always kind of Gen AI, but since they started beefing that up, it's actually become really annoying, to be honest. And it's like they want me to take out words that I don't want to take out. It used to be only helpful. Like, here's your spelling and here's you forgot this comma and here you go. Now it's like, no, we think that you should say this way. And it's like, but that's not what I'm trying to say. And it's become almost challenging to use it because I'm constantly like automatically taking their suggestions, but then realizing, no, you just messed up my whole email. Now I have to go back and do that. So, they probably just like, yeah, we already have the users. Let's just push this. And they don't really fully understand, the users 100%. So I think that's probably another advantage that the startups have, is really that deep understanding of the user.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. We're on calls with on site with users every day. I mean, it's really a core part of what we're doing. I mentioned that earlier, is gaining that trust and adoption. And that starts with fully understanding the workflow. I mean, at the level of, hey, when the patient comes in and I click here, I expect X, right, to happen.
Right.
Because and again, clinicians are not going to tell you that on a specific user feedback session. They don't really have, that they're not really interested in giving that user feedback. I mean, some are, but mostly you're going to have to be on site, observe them, and understand what they're doing intuitively by seeing, because they may be clicking somewhere that not intended to click, but just because it looks like something they thought would bring up something else, but they'll never complain, I clicked there and then I need to click the other place. You need to learn that. So anyway, the agility of startups, the ability to be very focused on your specific use case, which an EHR is like a sort of like a generalist company, right? So it's specific to healthcare, but they have a very wide array of platforms. So as that, what I was saying earlier is, the mindset needs to be, I don't want to be the EHR. I want to augment it, and I want to make something useful to bring value on top of what already is being provided. I'm just quite difficult.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Dr. Lewis, this was a lot of fun. I wish you guys tremendous continued success from 2 to 3 to 5 to 10 million patients and beyond. And this was fun. Thanks for spending time today.
Thank you, Mendel. I appreciate it.